Hey, I'm Derek Crevel, founder of Vehicle Graphics Academy and author of Vehicle Graphics Campaign Strategies. A lot of times people ask, hey, can I get an outside designer to do this? Or can I design it myself? And in a lot of cases, there is nothing really super complicated about the actual graphics and what it looks like on a vehicle. Any good designer can actually come up with content. But what is super, super important is that even though you can create a design on a mock-up or even on a template, to get that to look the way you actually envision it in a three-dimensional vehicle is not very easy. And you can't do that without understanding how to actually install graphics and how things go together and what is the impact of putting something on the back and how they go together on the sides or the hood and the side, etc. So only a good vehicle graphics designer who's had experience working with graphics can actually bring that together. They know what elements that they need to create separately, because remember, vehicle graphics, we're not talking about printing one continuous image and then you basically just wrap your vehicle with it. You're talking about creating graphics that's going to be chopped up into sections. So you've got a section for the back, you've got sections for the sides, so think of two big graphics for the sides, and then you've got something for the hood, very separate, and the sides need to meet with the hood, and then you've got the front needs to meet with the side, and then you've got the back needs to meet with the side, and sometimes you actually create graphics for the top that needs to meet with the back and the side. So it's not that easy, because vinyl stretches, the process of actually wrapping a vehicle means that an installer will actually take this vinyl that's being printed perfectly and actually start to bend that, mold it and stretch it and contour it so it actually fits the vehicle, and they're actually going to try and match things up and blend things and make things work together. So a good designer will actually design knowing that these two areas need to meet together, and they need to take certain precautions to make sure that actually when they go together that you really can't see a change in it. So for example, if you've got a very detailed pattern on the sides and a detailed pattern on the back, and you're hoping for those two to somehow go together and be perfect, it's not going to happen. It's very, very difficult to do. So what you typically tend to do is either make the areas where they're going to go together either very, very busy or very, very plain, so that when they go together, if it's very plain, then it's basically just colors. It really is not that critical. If it's really busy, then it really doesn't matter, because the pattern is so busy, it's not going to make a difference if they don't match up anyways. So that's just another little aside to understand the process. So the idea is, yes, you can use your existing designer, but just recognize that if they've never done vehicle graphics before, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to plan that. The other thing too is certain colors on vehicles and how the colors are interpreted when it's outside in the sunlight and as the day gets darker, etc. And at nighttime, a good vehicle graphics designer will actually understand that, and he's probably learned the hard way over time. Somebody who's doing websites or doing different types of design, unless you bring that to their attention, they may not be aware of that. There's elements within the design also where you actually want to separate it, unlike most other types of design where you're going to take the phone number out of the actual graphics and the URL, and maybe some of the captions, you may take that out of the graphics, you print the graphics and you actually apply those over top as a cut letter. Most people won't see that, but a good designer will actually do that, because it gives us more control over how to position your captions, your lettering, so that it's always going to look perfect on the vehicle. You try to print it in the graphics, a lot of times stretching, contouring in the shape of the vehicle will start to make it look awkward, so it may look shifted or curved or distorted somewhat. So those are some of the things to be aware of. So again, it's your call, but for the cost of a typical vehicle graphics designer, I would say leave it to the professionals. If you want to utilize your existing designer to actually oversee or even produce an initial concept, that might not be a bad idea. Or if you decide to actually have them do it, make sure that you work with somebody who is familiar with vehicle graphics designs and have them work together. Otherwise, you'll be very disappointed, because the installers may not be able to actually accomplish what it is that you put on the graphics. So hopefully that helps a little bit to put things in perspective. Now, as far as design, typically we use a template. So this template is to scale. It may be a 20th of the size, but the templates actually allow us to look at everything from the license plates to moldings on the vehicle, its size extremely accurately. There's a little bit of a tolerance. As you blow it up, you'll start to, it could be a few inches off here and there, but generally speaking, they're fairly accurate and they give you a good interpretation of what the actual vehicle looks like, and you actually can use that to design. Typically, you can design, most vehicle graphics companies will design using Illustrator, and sometimes they'll combine Illustrator with Photoshop. Photoshop gives you lots of flexibility that Illustrator doesn't. The only challenge is when you're working with very high resolution graphics, large images, they can sometimes take an enormous amount of time to process, and the file size become enormous. So most people who design vehicle graphics will actually work within Illustrator because they can utilize the vector format, they can utilize some of the features in Illustrator to actually give you perfect text using vector images, and actually the file size is very manageable. So those are some little questions I get from time to time as far as the file formats. Most of the actual processing and printing is done by the vehicle graphics company, and it's done typically depending on the type of printer they have, type of RIP program they have, and how they actually lay the files out. If you can design the vehicle in such a way that it actually looks seamless. In other words, there's a couple different ways to actually do the panels when you're printing. One is you can actually print panels. Typical size of a panel will typically be about 52 inches wide, so if you're printing a fairly large vehicle like a van, you may start to lay the panels out vertically in 54 or 52 inch strips, and actually they get installed. There's a small overlap. The installer will apply the overlap in a seamless manner, almost like wallpapering, so that when it's done you may see a little raised area where the overlap is. And so typically if you're doing vans, etc., there's really not a lot of ways you can get around that because the vehicles are so big. When you're doing cars or SUVs now, you can use that same technique, or you can actually create the design and map the image out and cut the image in such a way that you're actually running the panels horizontally, and you're cutting panels in areas where there may be areas of the door where you're going to cut anyways. So when it's done, you can almost achieve a seamless, it looks like paint. There's no seams, there's no overlaps. Some vehicles, if they're a little bit too big, you'll see small overlaps in certain strategic areas. But in most cases, a good company can actually take the graphics and do it in such a way that it's not obtrusive anywhere that they're overlapping. It's very subtle. So look for that, and maybe ask the company that you're dealing with how you can best achieve that. Right? Sometimes it costs a little bit more because they are going to have to use more vinyl, more inks. So hopefully this has been very educational. I'm going to cover more details on very specific on how to actually create that irresistible offer. We're going to talk a little bit more about campaigning versus prospecting versus branding, and why branding doesn't work, why campaigning works, and how you can actually start to utilize vehicle graphics to campaign, and how to put that together and what it looks like and feels like. So I want to talk a little bit more about that process, which I think is the most important aspect of actually getting your money's worth out of vehicle graphics. If you're really trying to achieve long-term success with your vehicle graphics and get the most out of it, you really need to master and understand that. And very few companies actually understand that. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about the myths associated with vehicle graphics and these huge numbers that you hear. Are they actually effective? Do you actually get this 70,000 impressions, and what does that mean, and so what? So I want to cover a little bit more of that. I don't have enough time in this video, but we'll make sure that we get you the next video.
Now, I've put together a wealth of resources, both for our clients and other business owners, to help them really achieve success with their vehicle graphics marketing. You can get access to this information free. Just go to www.vehiclewrapvideos.com and